Hello, beautiful alchemist. Welcome to Reiki Radio. I am your host, Yolanda, and today we have a very interesting conversation. We are going to sit down and chat with a woman named Nicole Barton, and she is the founder of Archetypal Apothecary. And her focus is helping us to discover our own inner apothecary, or also you can think of it as your own inner witch, which is to say, your own inner healer. Now, Nicole has her own journey with this archetypal healing. She will tell us all about it. She's also going to explain to you what a secret witch is. And if you are one, this is going to really pique your interest. We talk about archetypal remedies and different elements through her process of helping people get to know and discover all of the tools that have supported her in her path of self healing. So I'm really excited for you to learn from Nicole today. We have a wonderful conversation, but you can also check out her podcast, which is called Secret Witch Show. And you can learn more about her and her work at her website, which is nicolebarton.co.uk. And then finally, you can follow her on Instagram at I am Nicole Barton. So I really hope that you enjoy this conversation. It was very interesting. We had a lot of fun. Now, one thing I want to remind you of before we get into the episode is that you can access the entire Reiki Rays Global Healing Summit right now for the early bird special. It is 70% off, so you get access to the entire summit for $57. And that gives you immediate access. You can go through over 30 interviews at your own pace. There's so much to learn, so many juicy nuggets. I can tell you, I co-hosted, and so I had an opportunity to conduct, I think it was 18 interviews. And the co-host, Heather McCutcheon, she had some wonderful conversations as well. So be sure to get your ticket to the summit. The link is below. Also, I want to let you all know, for those of you who are on the Energetic Alchemist app, I am back. And so I am catching up with our daily readings, our readings by sign. If you are part of the app membership, where you have monthly membership on the app, I am going to offer a free class to members on the app just to say thank you for sticking around. And I apologize for being so busy recently, but now we're back to some normalcy. But if you're a member on the app, do email me and let me know if you would prefer the class to be focused on Reiki or focused on intuition. And once I get enough feedback, I will create the class and you will be invited. Again, that is for people who have the Awaken the Inner Alchemist membership on the app. But for those of you who have free access on the app, you still will be getting more of the free content now that I am back. So if you don't have the app yet, go to the Apple App Store or Google Play for Androids and download the Energetic Alchemist app. I put a lot of content on there for you. And then finally, if you would like to join me for an entire year of energetic alchemy, be sure to join the Alchemy Circle. Registration is open for the next cycle. It's a year-long program that you really dedicate to your practice of working on your energetic alchemy. We focus on some Reiki practices, but also some other practices within the realm of energetic arts. So you can learn more about that on my website, theenergeticalchemist.com. And members also receive access to the online classes that I will be teaching throughout 2025. Yeah, so there's a lot you get access to. So, all right, my loves, I think I have caught you up on everything. Now let's jump into this conversation with Nicole. I'm sure you will love it, and I will see you on the other side. Hello, everyone. We are here today on Reiki Radio with Nicole Barton, the founder of the Archetypal Apothecary. And I have to say, Nicole, I am very interested about learning more about your work today. So thank you for joining us.
Oh, it's my pleasure. I'm actually really impressed that you managed to pronounce that. It's something that most people can't say, so I'm very impressed. Me naming things like most people can't say, but yeah.
Yeah,
Thank you so much.
luckily,
Thank you for having
of
me.
course. Good thing I'm familiar with both. So, yes. Um, Speaking of this, I guess that's really a good place to start because a lot of people, it is kind of like a lot to say, the archetypal and the apothecary portion. And
Mm,
I would love to learn more about your journey that even led into this, which you call archetypal healing. So if you could
mm.
start before we get into your experience, could you just explain to people what is archetypal healing and then how does the apothecary part come in?
Oh, I love that. And so, do you know what? So much of it does tie into like my own personal journey. It's kind of like
Okay.
evolved through that. So we can do it either way. I can tell you
Okay.
about what it means, or we can kind of dive in and see what comes out of that. But just to give a brief overview, I guess you could see archetypal healing as working with like energy remedies, as like personality profiles to hold up a mirror to aspects of us that we've maybe shamed or shoved down. Um, and in particular, the way that I work with them is through the lens of the witch and her inner apothecary, because I believe that women have their own kind of like inner witch, inner self healer, a witch being a mirror for our self healing power, and our own inner apothecary of these energy remedies that we can work with for our own self healing. So, in a summary,
Yes.
I should have, yeah, I was going to say I should have captured all that, but we have on record because that was probably the most succinctly I've ever explained it.
No, that was a really good explanation, but it's interesting that you even mentioned the word witch and healer in what you
Hmm.
just described. I'm so glad you brought this up. It's funny. I literally just had a conversation with one of my cousin and my aunt 2 days ago, and my aunt called us witches because we were there helping her to
I
take
love
care of
that.
her. And my
Hmm.
cousin said, "Oh my God, why would you call us witches?" And I was like, "She's calling us healers." So could you just
Mm.
share a little bit from your lens, even this identification with the title witch and what that means to you as well?
Yeah, I love that question so much because there are so many different aspects of the witch, and
Right.
we're typically taught in society by our culture that the witch is something bad. You know, you think of the witch in mythology, she's this like ugly old woman who's like, working black magic, and people are like instantly terrified, which is timely actually, given Halloween's coming up. We're talking about
Yes.
this. It's like the season of the witch. But in fact, I wrote an article for a magazine earlier, which was talking about how the witch isn't just for Halloween, like she's for
Yes.
life. So she really helps us as we start to look at her because we have this fear. Fear is usually an indication that we've kind of shamed or suppressed something within us around that. So for me, my whole journey's been about reclaiming my witch and reclaiming the gold of the witch as well. So, loving back to wholeness, these kind of magical aspects of her. And by that, I mean, she has lots of different faces. So, I see one of the most important things when we start to work with the witch is reclaiming our creatrix. That's one aspect of her. She's this powerful feminine creatrix who knows how to wield magic. She knows how to create her life. She knows how to manifest what she desires. So there's one aspect of her, but like you say, the other aspect that I also work with is this healer, like this kind of powerful medicine woman, wise woman aspect of the witch that can be shamed and suppressed in our culture because of the fear that it's a little bit woo-woo or weird. So that's those are the two kind of main aspects of her, but they feel so important in our culture, even though they're kind of shamed and repressed.
Yes, no, 100%. And another thing too, I know we're going to get to your story, but you're saying so many things that are like, yes, yes, these light bulb
I
moments.
love that.
I love that you mentioned that she's not just the reclaiming of this, but the consciousness that plays a part. Because I always tell people you can either be a conscious creator or a
Mm,
conscious magician. But the truth of the matter is, we're creating all the time. It's just a lot
yeah.
of times we're creating from the space of not being consciously aware of how much our thoughts, our emotions, all of these energies are contributing to it. So I like
Yes.
that you highlight it really brings in this consciousness, this intentionality
Mm.
around how we are healing ourselves, creating our paths, all of these different layers. Yeah.
I
So
love that.
just want to bring that back around to now, Nicole, hearing about your journey. How did you even get on this path? What was going on for you to even rediscover your inner healer?
I love that. And I love how you kind of journeyed into like the unconscious versus conscious creation, because I think a lot of manifestation teachers out there kind of teach that there's something to do to manifest. Whereas, as you say, we're already creating, we're already
Right.
witches, we're
Yes.
already, powerful. We're just largely creating unconsciously what we
Right.
don't want. That's what I
Right.
was doing for a long time. So my journey, I would say there's like an initiation into the witch that we tend to have. Often
Yeah.
this will come in for me, often for many women as well, is it will come through some kind of health initiation. That was certainly my way into the witch. And it was quite young. So I was like age 10 when I first think I look back and now I can consciously see that that was a kind of initiation into the witch. And I burned out and was unable to walk. And I had what they didn't really know how to describe in the mainstream medical world as like chronic fatigue, ME. Well, they
Mm.
called it yuppie flu back then because they just didn't really understand what it was. And I often think the witch will call to us through these kind of mysterious things that the mainstream world can't really explain or help. And so I remember looking back always until fairly recently, a few years ago, and thinking, oh, poor Nicole, poor little Nicole, who like missed this year of school. Until one day I looked at it and I was like, no, our gifts are in our wounds. And this wound actually was a gift because I missed an entire year of school, but my mum took me to all the witchy healers that she possibly could because that was the only alternative, as it
Right.
seemed to her back then. And so I actually had like this beautiful, powerful initiation into all things magical. So whether that was Reiki or reflexology or homeopathy or whatever it was, like I explored it all. I
Yeah.
look back at it, I was like, wow, that was actually really magical. Um, but what happened was that although that healed me, because that kind of wasn't welcome in the world, that magic, I then kind of went into this kind of suppression of all that I'd learned. Magic was too edgy to own, like, and I was very young still, so I kind of just dismissed it and went back into the kind of cultural norms and kind of journeyed with like really just I was autistic, so I think always I think the witch often can be autistic and learns to mask herself. But I'd kind of learned to fit in order to be loved. And so I continued that pattern and did all that was expected of me, in essence. I got the kind of high flying career as a brand manager and worked really hard to do that. I was renovating a house. I'd got married young and found the perfect husband and did all the things that were kind of like expected, like got all my ducks lined up in a row, ticked all the boxes. And then it all kind of came crashing down again because at the age of 24, I experienced the exact same initiation again of burnout. And so like I went back into like exploring all the witchy things because like, well, that helped me before. And I'd also gone through a period of trying what I now call like quick fixes. So, doctors didn't really help with this kind of mystery illness again. Therapists weren't really helping, medication wasn't helping. I tried numbing it, that wasn't helping in all the kind of typical ways that we do, whether with food or alcohol or, all those sorts of things. And I just remember feeling so broken and so depressed, so like unable to walk again. Everything came crashing down. I lost my job, and I just was in this again, this like the depths of darkness, which I think the witch again can take us into.
Right.
Um, and and so I know it doesn't feel good when we're in that,
Yeah.
and that was very much my own journey. And then from there, I remember, and I thought back on this recently, at the time, again, it was very much unconscious, but I said to myself when I was in this kind of depths of despair, I was like, I'm gonna try homeopathy again, because that seemed to be the one thing that like really helped me. And I said to myself, well, if homeopathy helps me again, I'm going to devote my life to it and I'll study it and I'll, carry on. And I get goosebumps thinking about it and get very emotional because it wasn't until a few years ago when I kind of birthed a modality, again, not not really intending to do that from that moment. But I look back and I think, wow, that was a magical devotion that actually was me setting an intention that led to the creation and the birthing of what is now the Archetypal Apothecary modality. And I had no idea at the time that that was what was happening. And I think that can often happen, is like what we start to heal for ourselves will eventually become, you know, our gift to others. And I don't know whether to pause there, but I was just going to share
Yeah.
that some of the, you know, I started to realize as I kind of devoted my life to homeopathy, that what I was really devoting my life to was learning how to heal ourselves. And that's kind of like the foundation of everything that I do. And there's a whole rest of that journey that I can explore about in terms of like how I channeled the modality, because I think there's some gold in there as well. But ultimately, I started to then work with, you know, homeopathy, and then was learning to channel homeopathic remedies as archetypal personality profiles for myself first and foremost, and then went on to see that actually this was something that would help other women as well. So I'm going to pause there because I know I just said a lot.
Yeah. No, I mean, it's great. And there's a part of this, you know, again, I'm just like, you're making my mind go boo, boo, boo. I'm really glad you bring up the topic of initiation. And the reason is because I think once we go through, I think we go through several, but I think once we go through any initiation that is quite significant and we land on the other side, we can have that clarity of looking back and having an appreciation for, wow, that was really rough, but perhaps there was no other way to uncover what was hidden. And, you know,
Mm,
the part that you talk about learning where to wear masks to cover up who you really were, you know, so many of us do this, of course, right? We're told
mm,
who we're supposed to be through parents, society, on and on and on. And I think a lot of us feel unseen or misunderstood and feel like, you know, this whole like imposter syndrome
mhm,
until something does happen that has to break that up.
mm.
But
Yes.
with what you were saying, it's interesting how whatever it is that is craving to be revealed, like this truth within us, it
Mm,
usually does take something very uncomfortable, you know, to,
yeah.
you know, shake that up, to crack off that, like that costume, the illusion, whatever. But the reason
Mm,
I'm so glad you bring it up is because a lot of people find themselves in this space, right? They find
mm,
themselves in these,
mhm,
why me? Why is this happening to me? Everything feels destructive or hard or challenging, but they're not able to necessarily in the moment see what is being revealed. And what you
mm,
remind me of, Nicole, is, you know, in some cultures where they'll have like a rite of passage,
yes.
some kind of thing. And the person might have to go like out in the woods or like hunt a tiger or do something very challenging. It's not like push and lush, like, oh, you're going to be fed grapes and like you have to do this
Mm,
thing that puts you like on the brink of death almost, right? And
yeah.
then come out on the other side with whatever wisdom. So I just wanted to ask you about that. I mean, now hindsight, talking about how challenging it was when you're in the thick of it, did you have any of that experience of why me and like that hopelessness,
Mhm.
or where did
Yes.
you get to the understanding of like, whoa, this is liberating me in some way?
Yeah, I love that. I love that question because it was for a long, long time. I remember feeling that sense of hopelessness. And I actually remember calling it, I said to one of my clients once, it's like I had this victim slap. I remember
Mm,
going to a therapist actually. And I say that lightly because I totally do not feel like I was being a victim. And that was
yeah,
quite a, but I remember this therapist sort of basically saying to me, "You're not a victim, are you, Nicole?" And I was like, "Of course I'm not. I'm like fighting having this illness and like all these different things." And I sat back and I kind of reflected on it and I was like, yeah, it was just like a slap across the face to
yeah,
say there's a power here. And I think
mhm,
that's kind of what has started me on this path of like self-discovery. And the witch was probably the first time that I started to, as I worked with her, was probably the first time I started to really become conscious of my power. Because until that point, I'd felt hopeless, I'd felt helpless, like I was, you know, suicidal at points because I was
yeah,
just like, there's no hope of change. And so I felt utterly broken. And there was just that moment, from her, which I think she, after that, I took myself off to Bali and like went on this big journey of like real self-discovery and came to the witch. And I remember working with a soul guide who was an archetypal healer in a different way, in the way that we probably would more traditionally work with the feminine, the divine feminine archetypes, so like the queen or the mother or the lover or the wise woman. And and what happened was I started to work with those for myself, and the queen was one that I was largely working with to begin with, because I think, again, that kind of opening to our power is almost like the creatrix energy that we need in order to be able to access some of the other archetypes as well. And the witch and the queen together were two that I worked with very closely. But what was interesting was that as I worked with these traditional archetypal energies, I started to notice how my mind was taking me to homeopathic remedies. And this is kind of how it started to begin being birthed, because instead of working with the queen, I would see that I was working with, say, archetypal aurum, which is gold, and that the energy of gold is very much the energy of the queen. And then there were other archetypes, and interestingly, you said about these periods of rite of passage. I found that a lot of the remedies that women do need to work with to own their witch is they are around like the maiden mother crone, that kind of those kind of feminine initiations for our healing. And so those were the kind of energies I worked with, but I was mapping them to homeopathic remedies. So the maiden mapped to the archetypal rosa, the rose, or the wild woman or the mother mapped to lupa, which is the remedy of she-wolf, and the wise woman mapped to the energy of luna, which is the moon. And all of these remedies have their own homeopathic personalities. There's a whole book of them, and they've got like 3,500 of them fully mapped out in the way that homeopathy has worked with them. And how homeopathy works is it has what's called provings. So these are case studies where people have worked with the remedies, and they've taken what showed up for people in those and they've pulled them into like a book, basically a materia medica of the particular expressions of each remedy and the particular personalities of each remedy. And so because I could spot patterns, I just began to see like, oh, these remedies are exactly the same as archetypes. And what happened was I started to realize I didn't even need to take, so I don't know if you know how homeopathy traditionally works. For anybody who isn't aware, homeopathy is like an energy medicine system where people will go to a homeopath traditionally and be prescribed a remedy in a little pill form. And I started to see that we could almost like we didn't need the pill. We could just work with this energy remedy as a personality, as an archetype, and channel it for ourselves in order to actually get the same impact. And I was having the same impact without taking the remedy as I was if I had taken the remedy. And then other women that I started to work with in the same way were also having the reaction as if they'd taken the remedy. And I kind of realized that there was something big in this. It was like, oh, like there's a new way of working. Like it kind of essentially mapped out this whole self-healing modality, which is what I now call archetypal apothecary. I'm going to pause there again because I don't know if I've gone off on a
Yeah.
tangent.
No, so the interesting thing that's coming up around the archetypes, I remember I have the book many years ago. I think it's Carolyn Miss, I'm not sure, but she
Yes.
had a whole book on archetypes.
Mhm.
And you're bringing up the idea of a lot of times we look towards the powerful ones or the ones that we may think
Mhm.
are very positive, but what's standing out is like she has one archetype, say, that's like the prostitute, right?
Mhm.
And so even recognizing where we may have benefit of learning through, I don't want to say like the lesser or lower archetypes, but the ones that we wouldn't
Mhm.
necessarily
Yes.
idolize, you know what I
Uh-huh.
mean? Yeah.
Yes.
And because you even mentioning how we have access to many,
Mhm.
and it reminds me of even the phases and the stages that we go through in life. So I wanted to
Mhm.
ask you if there were any type of archetypal expressions that you experienced that maybe you wouldn't necessarily categorize as like, ooh, the queen or something so great, but you still
Mhm.
saw perhaps some learning in that. The other thing, Nicole, with what you're saying about, you know, we don't necessarily have to take the pill and that we can work with and channel these energies. It made me think about that mind body connection, right? And
Mhm.
how, you know, we know through all layers of this work that our consciousness and energies all contribute to the functionality of body.
Mhm.
And so it's like almost looking at these two different pathways of how do you um, rectify what's being held in body. So you could either do it in a chemical way, which the body will
Mhm.
respond to, but then we also have this way of also creating shift and change just through the lenses of consciousness and energy that can be just as impactful to body.
Yes, I love that because even homeopathy is really distilling like whenever there's a manifestation of physical illness,
Hmm.
it's really coming from a disturbance or
Right.
separation from soul. And
Hmm.
so even the pills themselves, that's the kind of underlying universal principle, I guess. And yeah, it's exactly that. And what I think is beautiful about what you said there around the archetypes that Carolyn Miss um talks about, and these are kind of like the common ones that we see in mythology and we can relate to, and they do feel juicy and they feel
Yeah.
exciting. I think what homeopathy adds to that, when you kind of combine the two, is there's this whole, as we were talking about physical, there's this whole like physical map that homeopathy provides, because I sort of see it now like, oh, if you're working with that archetype, like what physical things are you healing with that?
Yes.
And it's like, actually, I can already see, because there's a whole map over here for all the physical things that we're manifesting if we're in the shadow of a particular archetype, if that
Yeah.
makes sense.
Yes. No, that makes all the sense. It's just a very interesting thing because, again, I'm just thinking of how whatever it is that you have gone through, it's so many people go through that bring us into these aha moments. But you're also bringing up, I think we have to go through these initiations to even understand a lot
Mm,
of these layers of, we'll say, wisdom that's there.
mhm,
So, had you not gone through what you went through, you may have been introduced to archetypes and all of these other modalities, but they may not have unlocked for you in the same way. There
yes.
may not have been
Mm,
that same depth of understanding. And
mhm,
it's just coming up, I guess, because again, there are so many people going through things that are challenging. And
mm,
instead of feeling like, why me? Hopefully they're hearing this and saying, maybe they're curious now, like, what is this revealing to me? What may I be learning? These kinds of things. So I wanted to talk to you about this because there are the three layers to your work that
mhm,
are very significant in what you do, which point to the healing, the discovery, and the expression. So could you
mhm.
talk a little bit about those three layers and why they're so significant?
Yeah, I love that. And also, just as you were sharing that just around people, going through these initiations, I just had the nudge to say, like, the most important thing, like, forget the art and science of it, like,
Hmm.
the most important thing in all of it is to have compassion for ourselves. And I
Yes.
think that is what's healing. So I just
Right.
wanted to share that, because I know, I mentioned the victim stuff earlier. That's not me saying that we're victims.
Right.
That's me saying, like, we need to have compassion for the younger versions of ourselves that are still unconsciously creating, like we talked about earlier. And
Yeah.
that's where that compassion piece is so important. I know that wasn't answering your question
No,
about the other
no,
thing,
it's
but
good to
it
point out.
just felt so important to, I didn't feel like I shared it in enough detail earlier. I've completely forgotten your other question now. I know it was about the three the three layers.
Yes, yes. So yeah, so with the three layers, you have this piece of where there's highlight in your work around healing, discovery, and expression. So just
Mhm.
wondering if you could share why, because I mean, you could have chosen anything to highlight, really. So why
Yes.
are these three components so important in your work?
Yeah, I love that question. So essentially, for me, like, what I started to notice was that a lot of women were wanting to be healers, and a lot of my journey had been in that we kind of need to heal ourselves first before we kind of rush into healing. There's a lot of kind of quick fix promises around becoming a healer out
Yeah.
there. And for me, it was like, well, there's been this whole journey, and it felt so important to acknowledge that part of the becoming of a healer is learning to heal ourselves. And I guess why I say that is because I started to see there's a principle of homeopathy, which is called a universal law called similia similibus. And what that means is that the fundamentals of healing, magical healing, let's call it, are that like cures like. Similia similibus means like cures like. So in that way, what we are scared of will help us heal in the same way we talked about with the witch.
Right.
So that's what that principle means. But what I also started to see was that people are remedies and like cures like.
Mm-hmm.
So we have to be able to have gone through our own kind of heroine's journey, healing ourselves, to be able to discover our gifts and know what they are, and be able to then express that into the world in a way that's actually going to be activating medicine for people who are like us, people who are similar to us.
Yeah.
So we kind of have to have been through that healing phase in order to be able to, and that discovery of our gifts in that way, in order to be able to express our gifts. So it became Heal, Discover, Express for that reason. But also that was my own journey. Like I had seen all of this around how we have to heal ourselves first. And it just makes most sense that way.
Yeah, no, 100%. It's funny when you said that, it popped into mind. It's like an energetic vaccine of sorts. But you also bring up a really good point. And, I agree with you 100%. All of my work is focused on like, we have to heal ourselves. And
Mm,
I get that we have this desire to free other people from whatever their suffering may be. Like it breaks our hearts to see
mhm,
other people and their suffering. And of course it would, because we're all interconnected. So like if I see you suffering, I'm going to feel the suffering. And so
mm,
in a sense, it's like I kind of want to alleviate it from myself too.
mm,
But this idea that comes up with what you say is, I guess I would call it like healer versus fixer. So a lot of
mm.
times people have this
Yes.
desire to be healers, but really what they're trying to do is be these fixers.
Hmm.
And that's like a whole different channel of function.
Mm,
Whereas I know that we also are similar in thinking of love as being the healer. And
hmm,
so there's this powerful activation, I would even say, that comes when we do allow what you mentioned, the compassion for ourselves, that softening, and allowing love to really become the greatest remedy of sorts.
mm,
Through the lens of energy work, I really believe that then when love is the healer in expression, it's not just about what we do. It's not about trying to fix anything, but
mm,
rather you allow that the energy of that, it's so transforming that
mm.
there's nothing to fix, and you don't
Mhm.
necessarily look at it from the lens of the fixer.
Yeah.
And the
Yeah.
healer is essentially like being a lover, not in a
Mhm.
romantic way, but you know what
I
I
love
mean?
that.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, I do love
Yeah.
that.
So I just wanted to ask you about that. Did you have any part where you were, I would say, excited about the transformation you were experiencing, that you may have almost fallen into the role of like a fixer? Or did you,
Mm.
yeah, like
Mhm.
what helped you to recognize, like,
Yeah.
I've got to love me
Yeah.
and
I
get
love
this,
that.
yeah, get this done first?
I love that question. I think yeah, I mean, certainly most of my life, even, back when I was 10, I think that was where I think I see it almost like as a journey. Like we
Yeah.
start off trying to fix ourselves, and then something awakens us to this idea of like, oh, no, I'm already whole. And I think I had this kind of like, I often refer to it as like my ascension phase, where I
Yes.
started to see like there's something bigger than us.
Yeah.
Like that energy could be called God, it could be called love, it could be called, spirit, whatever it is, that there's this like greater universal intelligence to life.
Hmm.
And it was at that moment that I started to see, oh, like we're not broken. We are this source energy. And this is all about, as I descend, I call it then my descent phase, where I came back into body and back into soul. I started to see, oh, okay, this is about like returning to wholeness and returning to our full expression. And I think a big part of that was down to the homeopathy journey, because I can't remember the quote now, but there's a famous homeopath called James Tyler Kent, who said something along the lines of, I might have to find it, because
Okay.
it was a quote about. Let me just. I know it's right in this easily accessible document, so just give me one moment.
No
He
problem.
said. he said there's no cell or tissue so small that it does not keep its soul and life force in it.
Mm.
And for me, that just suggests that any physical or disturbance or whatever it is that we're expressing and manifesting, like there's some beyond that is like there's some separation from soul. And it was when I started to see that, it was like, really, this is all about expression and suppression.
Yeah.
And like and ultimately like that's we're whole at our core, and like there's different layers of the onion where we've learned that we're not whole, and they just want loving back to wholeness. That is what healing is.
Yeah. You saying that too, Nicole, it's making me wonder. I think there's a lot of hope in that, like just hearing where no matter where, how you may be identifying yourself, because I think a lot of this work does also point to re-identification to
Mm,
some degree. No matter where you are, if there's this knowing that at the very core, to your point, you're not broken and you
mm,
are an expression of divine intelligence, even if you can't quite feel it yet, even
mm,
if you don't understand or you think, how is that possible? Look at my life type of thing.
mm,
Even just that planting of that knowing that there is
mm,
this potential that I could rediscover this aspect of
mm,
myself, I think that in of itself creates a lot of hope for people. And
mm,
I think that's even what may be so magnetizing about this work is because even if we don't fully understand yet, there's something in us that knows this is the
mm.
way to remember. This is the way to, rediscover, right? So
Yeah.
that brings up, I notice in your work, there's a lot of talk about the secret witch. So
Mhm.
I wanted to ask you, what is the secret witch? And was that part of what you really discovered?
Yeah, yeah, I love that. Yeah, the secret witch is essentially in a nutshell. I love her. Just to say, like, this is a version of me. Like, the secret witch is a woman who is secretly magical, a bit like I was saying, like, but has
Yeah.
learned to hide and shame that aspect of herself. And that might be, in her power to heal herself, or in her, desire to live her destiny as a healer. Like, whatever it is, she's hiding. Like
Mhm.
she's not being the full, unapologetically magical, full expression of herself. And in that way, there is that disturbance, that separation from soul. She's not living who she really is, being that full expression. Um, and ultimately, the secret witch can learn how to harness her own, her unapologetic witch and her own inner apothecary to heal herself and to discover her gifts and to learn how to express them into the world. And for me, she just captures, that version of me that hid my magic. That we talk about people as remedies. It was all that I described about my own journey, and this kind of like sense of being powerless, not wanting to be magical, and feeling like that was going to be judged or shamed, or all of those sorts of things, and just didn't express my truth.
Yeah. It also brings up how, again, like we're kind of spell casting all the time. And
Mm,
you're making me feel or think about the power just in our feelings. So again, even if we aren't consciously aware of what we're fully capable of or how we can be very intentional in these expressions and our magic, so to speak, it's making me think of the times in life where we have intense feeling and that feeling is
mm,
being projected towards something, some outcome, something. So like things where people fall in love, and they have those early stages and they're so in love and they're projecting all this ooey
mhm,
gooiness, and they're really kind of conjuring and conjuring more of this feeling and this magnetism, not necessarily intentionally knowing that they may be strengthening a bond or connection, but it's just the
mm,
intensity of the feeling that is causing something to build, we'll say, right? And then
mhm,
when people feel extreme hurt or anger, they also are going through this conjuring of feeling. And then where people may start to think, they'll project thoughts of like, well, I hope this person gets their lesson. I hope they get their karma, the crazy things we say.
mm,
But it's like, but if you really understood the power behind those feelings and those projections, I think it would also make us more responsible and accountable to how we are wielding our magic, so to speak. And
Yeah.
so this healing of ourselves, I think it hits so much deeper than just I feel good in my body or I
Mhm.
recognize that I'm this powerful being, but I think it does tend to lead a lot of us then into that space
Mhm.
of the power of our compassion and kindness and why that is more mm, not just impactful, but so much more beautiful than, those energies that we can conjure that can be so destructive. Not to say, I mean,
Mm.
obviously destruction is also a necessary force, but you see what I mean? Like I feel
Yeah,
like
the
there's so
witch is
much
good at
more.
distracting and burning things
Yes,
down.
yeah.
For
Yes,
sure.
yes. But with
I
reason. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. And unconsciously as well. Again,
Right.
we have to remember the innocence of it.
Yes.
What that brought to mind again is that conversation you were talking about earlier about conscious creation. I think that was really the shift, and that's for me how healing occurs,
Right.
is in that kind of starting to peel back the layers and
Mhm.
see that we're unconsciously creating
Right.
these remedies that I talk about. They're alive in us already. It's not like we're going to just go away and work with them and be like, okay, now I'm working with Aurum. Like Aurum's already here. It's just Aurum's expressing from, say, like the tyrant energy. Like
Yes.
she's, that could be a way that the secret witch is showing up.
Yeah.
And what we do with the remedies is, as Jung said, we learn to make what's unconscious conscious, because until
Mhm.
we make what's unconscious conscious, it would direct our lives, and we'll call it fate. That's
Right.
one of my favorite quotes. And in essence, that's what the remedies are doing. Like they are providing us with a lens, and we can see exactly how Aurum expresses in her shadow. And we go, oh, look at this. This is really, so I always see it as like taking Aurum off the shelf of our little inner apothecary and being like, oh, gold. What's the shadow of gold? And like we see the shadow of gold is like projecting our power onto other people, being helpless, or on the opposite end of the shadow pole, being a tyrant, forcing people into our own perspective, or like, berating people or berating ourselves. Like, and we have this lens to kind of illuminate what's been unconscious pattern wise
Right.
within us, and that's what is truly healing. But like you say, it has to be done with love, and the reclamation of the gold or the gifts of each archetypal remedy can only come in if we have enough love and compassion to start to spot those patterns.
Yeah. I really want to ask you about what you have noticed with working with people and even in your own path in this discovery and in this, I want to say, like realizing in different kinds of ways, what you've noticed as shift and change. But first, I have to tell you, just randomly, it popped in mind. Did you ever see the play Wicked?
No, I haven't
You haven't?
actually, but I
Oh,
should. I
yes,
totally
you
should.
should. Yes. Have you ever seen Wizard of Oz?
Yes, I
Yes.
have.
Okay. So it's essentially the story of the Wicked Witch of the West.
Oh,
Yeah.
oh, I didn't even
But
know that.
oh yeah, yeah, yeah. But
Mm.
it gives you the background of how she became that expression and it just
Um,
you'll be in tears. Anyway, I think with your work you
mm.
should definitely watch Wicked. I don't know
I'm on
how you
it.
can see it. Yes. You
I'm
have to
already
see
creating
this.
that.
Yeah, yeah. But how have you noticed this work show up in expression for the people that you work with? Like what do they recognize and how does it empower
Mm.
them? Like what shift and change have you
I love that. Yeah, I
realized?
love
Yeah.
that so much. I guess there's lots of ways that this kind of shows up. A lot of the things that women have journeyed with are very similar to my own themes, burnout, mysterious physical illnesses, particularly a lot of feminine symptoms, because the witch is a symbol of feminine power.
Mhm.
And I call it feminine soft power as well, because it's like that kind of heart-led piece to it, but that it will show up in those sorts of ways. And what you're talking about earlier about kind of that temptation in the witch to rescue and people
Yeah.
please and be like, okay, I'm going to put all my needs to one side
Right.
and go in and help others. There's very much that aspect. There's a deep sensitivity that I think is often rejected. So that kind of high level feeling capacity to feel, a very, very much the emotions. Like there will often be this temptation to suppress our emotions and numb and, or on the opposite end, kind of be very anxious about things and all of that. And I think those are the sorts of things that I see women like really being able to heal with their inner apothecary. That said, there are so many, I mean, anything can be a remedy. And that's I think the beauty of it is that like literally the whole world has a remedy to reflect to us. Yeah, I can't remember your question now, but I think in essence, those are the kind of physical and emotional manifestations, and of course, them being able to recognize in their wounds what their gifts are and start
Yes.
to be like, oh, this is why I went through that. Like,
Right.
because now I'm able to help others journey that as well.
Yes.
Um, and so there's a lot of emotional healing, but also like that rediscovery of what they're here for. And that just feels so juicy and magical to me.
Doesn't it? It does. It does. And it's crazy. I can't believe how quickly the time is going. But there's another piece to this that I have to ask you about. And again, I think it's where we're very similar in how we work. So I know that you do work with people one on one. They can work with you to discover these various layers, but also there's this element of the power of community, which I
Mm,
also love so much in the ways that we can gather together and hold the space for each other and how even transformative that can be. You
mm,
did mention earlier that the idea of like healing like, right? And that can
mhm.
often display itself even through our
Yeah.
relationships with others. Yeah. So could you talk a little bit about the different facets of your work, how people can work with you, but then also
Yeah.
the gift that you recognize in the communal aspect of it
Yes.
all?
I love that so much. And yeah, you absolutely spot on with, the reason why for me, sisterhood and community group work is so vital. And a lot of the way that I have been serving the remedies is through group work.
Yes.
And as you mentioned, one to one, because there's a whole soul map
Right.
kind of element to this as well that I guide women through because I believe, our soul came here to actually experience particular remedies
Mhm.
as well. So there's a way of like mapping out what those are given the experiences we've had in our lives and so that and there's lots of different layers of remedies as well. But yeah, going back to the sisterhood piece, it's absolutely vital in many ways, I think, because people are remedies. And at the end of the day, that's what the healing activation is. Without somebody who's there as a mirror to reflect, like back to us aspects of ourselves, like there is no healing.
Mhm.
I mean, we can work with them as symbols for ourselves. And I often say, their personality, these remedies are like personality profiles and also spirit guides we can call them in and work with them in that way and just as we would any other spirit guide
Yeah.
so we can do that alone, but there's like just another depth and richness to being in community with other people who can be their remedy
Yeah.
for us as well. And so my work is very much, there's a one-to-one and a soul mapping element, but there's also group group stuff. And like, for example, at the moment, I'm just about to lead a journey with Archetypal Remedy Luna, which is the moon, to help women connect to their magic, and that's going to be juicy because it's like there's the group element. But moving forwards, my vision for next year is to create some kind of secret witch membership where I can really like be there as the guide, but help people to journey with the remedies themselves. And so I'm super excited about that. That's like you're the first person to know about this actually, but it's just yeah, that's going to be one of the things that I'm looking forward to bringing in next time. Yeah, and there's
Yeah.
lots of free resources as well.
I love to
We
hear
have.
that you're also in that space of I have also been planning for next year and looking forward to,
Mm,
yeah. So the similar thing I do, it's called the Alchemy Circle, and that's the group,
I love
work.
that.
But I love to hear because I'm always like, am I crazy that I'm planning next year already? I'm glad to hear you are too. But also it comes up with what you're saying. All these movies are popping to mind, Nicole. Um, I like what you're saying because I think it also can free people from that that stigma of, the comparison piece of, oh, well, this person, they're able to do this, or this is what their gift is, and why isn't that mine? And that can be so
Mm,
distracting, where we can miss out on really what our gift is, or
mhm.
what our contribution is, if we're worried or comparing to others. But the image that came to mind, it's probably like every witch movie in creation. There's always like several witches, and they all have a unique gift or something to share.
Yeah.
And when they
Hmm.
come together, it's almost like their powers amplify because of
Hmm.
the uniqueness that each one brings.
I
So
love
that
that.
visual was coming to mind when you are sharing what you share, because it's like, if we really could just recognize and embrace our uniqueness, we would
Mm.
see how that then amplifies for the collective. We didn't need to all come do the same thing. you
I
know?
love that. Yeah, there's
Yeah.
such a freedom in that. I've kind of got this visual now of like a cauldron right in between
Yes.
us, and we're like
Yes.
gathered around it, like calling in all the witches, like, come be your unique medicine. I love that. Yeah, no, there's so much magic in that. And just the fact that, to know that we each have our own unique soul remedy. We
Mhm.
own have our own unique expression. So even if somebody has, a similar, they're in a similar thing, maybe you're both Reiki healers or whatever
Right.
it is, like you still have your own unique expression of that. It's almost like, often you could call the work that I'm doing is like helping people to know their niche in some ways, although that's not really how I see it. But it's like, what's your unique flavor?
Yeah.
I've had somebody else just define it as like, what's your light bulb? Like, what color is your light bulb? You've got a light bulb in your head, but like we all have our own unique archetypal remedy is
Yes.
the essence of it. And there's so much freedom in
Yeah.
seeing that, because it stops, like you say, that sense of like, well, my remedy is not as good as that person's. There's always
Yes.
going to be someone like us that needs the remedy that we're here to serve, and that our soul was born here to serve as well.
Yes. Yes. I hope this is like making light bulbs go off for the people listening and joining with us. No, 100%. So one last thing I want to make sure that everyone knows about the work, and because you offer a lot. And of course, we will share your website, which is nicolebarton.co.uk. And you also have a podcast. So everyone listening, there's so much more you can learn about Nicole and her work, even through the lens of her podcast called The Secret Witch Show. So could you tell us a little bit about this, what you focus
Mm.
on, and what was the inspiration? Why did you start?
Yeah. Do you know, I was thinking about this the other day because we're just about coming up to our 100th episode. And so I was like feeling into the celebration vibes, and I was like, oh, what did make me start this? And I think it was, again, just that way of like really expressing. Like
Yeah.
before that, it was like my witch was hidden, and I was like,
Yes.
I'm gonna express my witch. She's not gonna be secret anymore, but I'm gonna talk about her because
Yes.
that's who she is, and this is who I'm here to serve.
Right.
And so it was very inspired, actually. Like I think the name just came to me like in a very guided way. I never forget, actually, just even beginning to own my witch. I was kind of like doing some archetypal work with my guide, and sort of like, oh, well, who am I? Like, which archetype am I? And I remember saying to her, and I was like, do you know, and I was like, really like, oh, I think maybe I need to whisper this. Like, I think I'm a witch. And as soon as I said it, my house set on fire.
Wow.
I know.
Wow.
And it was like, okay, this is definitely this is definitely the truth here. It was all good, by the way. We had some fire engines out. It was just our fire had like gone up, and it was all fine. But it was like
Yeah.
confirmation, like real magical synchronicity. And
Yes.
funnily enough, the other guide that I worked with had also said to the same guide just 10 minutes before, I think Nicole's a witch. So it's just
Uh,
like so magical. And like
yes.
it came from that, really, because then I was like, oh, well, I was a secret witch and now I'm a liberated witch. So that's how it came about. Yeah.
Oh, that's very cool. And so on the podcast, do you speak to other secret witches, or is it you sharing information, a blend? What could we
It's a
expect?
mix. So every other episode is a solo on me sharing around the witch and her remedies, and then every other episode is some kind of witchy guest. So yeah,
Yeah.
there's lots of magic on there. Yeah.
Beautiful. And then we can listen to Secret Witch Show on all of the podcast platforms, I
Hmm.
imagine. Yeah. Is it
Yes,
also in video format? Is it just
it
audio?
is. It's
Okay.
just about just literally birthing as that right now. So yeah.
Ah, okay. So
Yeah.
we'll be able to in the future watch the interviews as well.
Yes, yeah.
Okay.
Well, the ones from now on are going out as videos. So some of the early ones are just
Yeah.
audio. But now, yeah, I'm super excited about that. We've got a cool new intro as well, which is
Oh, how
very
fun.
exciting.
Yes, the iterations of the podcast. Yeah, I did the same thing. I
Yeah.
completely understand. I have to say, Nicole, it was such a pleasure speaking with you. And I'm sure, just like you had so many light bulbs going off for me, I'm sure a lot of people are very curious now about their own inner witch. We didn't get to talk too much about it, but you also have these 8 elements that you work with as well. If you could
Mhm.
just briefly describe what the 8 elements are about, and they can learn
Yeah.
more, of course, on your website.
Yeah, sure. The eight elements are really like the fundamentals. They're kind of like my part of my point of view as to how like what we need to journey with in order to like really kind of own and heal, own our healer, own our witch.
Yes.
And so I can't remember if I've updated them to what they are on the website. But in essence, I believe that to begin with, like we need to open our hearts. So there's
Yes.
opening. There's also embodiment because I feel like we have to really come into our bodies to be able to start to, read the sensations that are letting us know, what's going on. Um, and then we have, I'm trying to remember them, they're up here. So we've
You
got
have
soul,
soul.
soul alchemy,
Yes.
which is, of course, all the work about like reclaiming the wholeness of our soul. I think the next one's self-illumination, which
Yes.
is, of course, working with the kind of the archetypes to illuminate these different elements of our soul that want to be reclaimed. They're up here, so I'm trying to
We have
remember them. That's not
invocation.
updated. Invocation of the remedies, like calling them in, inviting them to reveal things, as you said, like show us the way, like show us what we need to see. If we think of them as spirit guides as well, like they will, if we activate them. And I always warn people, like, do this with caution because when we start to work with these energies, like they're powerful. They
Yeah.
will, often call in what I call material for our liberation, which is these challenging initiations often. They don't call
Right.
to us, like you say, with roses and butterflies. Like they
Yeah.
call to us through darkness. So often when we call them in, like they will show us where our patterns are for healing. So that's invoking. Um, the
Manifestation.
manifestation is obviously about learning to kind of hone back our power to consciously create, and then majesty is about like really, yeah, that power of reclaiming our feminine power piece. So yeah, there's all of those that
Yes.
are kind of woven into all the work that I do, but yeah.
And for anyone counting, she ends on community, which we did get a chance to
Oh yeah,
speak
I
about.
forgot that
Yes,
one.
but no, but we did. We spoke about community. So yeah, I
We
feel like they
did.
got a dose of that. Well, I have to
Yes.
say again, it really has been a pleasure speaking with you. I look forward to tuning into the podcast, The Secret Witch Show. And for everyone listening, of course, learn more about Nicole and her work at her website, which is nicolebarton.co.uk. But you can also follow her on Instagram at I am Nicole Barton. And I will have the links for all of this down in the show description. So thank you so much for taking the time to come and share with us today, Nicole.
Oh, it's been my deepest pleasure. I've loved this. It's like my favorite, I love these rich, deep, juicy conversations. So it's just
Yeah,
been a magical way
I
to
know,
spend
me
the
too.
afternoon.
You'll have to come again because I'm like, we could have gone on about this all day. So yeah.
I'd love that. I'd love it.
Yes. And thank you all for joining us today. We will see you very soon. Bye for now. All right, beautiful alchemist. How did you enjoy that information with Nicole Barton? I really did. It was so nice to sit down and chat with her and laugh with her. If you want to know more about Nicole's work, be sure to visit nicolebarton.co.uk. You can also follow her on Instagram at I am Nicole Barton and learn more about her work with Archetypal Apothecary. And if you want to join the Reiki Rays Global Healing Summit, get full access now for the early bird special. Use the link below to get your ticket. And if you want to join me in the Alchemy Circle, be sure to go to my website, theenergeticalchemist.com. Look at everything you get access to and register right away. Space is limited. I cannot wait to spend an entire year with you. So I want to thank Nicole again for coming to share. Thank you all for being here. And remember to always journey in love.